Chapter 4. The Plane. The orange lights of the departures board have seared themselves into Dazai's eyes. He squinted at the list, trying to read it before it quickly moved on, hoping to just catch one line that he understood. He wished he hadn't had to leave his phone behind in Yokohama. Google Translate would have been very helpful right now. Eventually, after many cycles through all the different departures, he managed to decipher one that sounded good. How about Manaus? Chuuya paused, thinking, before shrugging. What the hell, why not? Smiling, Dazai pushed through the crowd to see if there were any tickets available, although he would be surprised if there wasn't. Bangkok to Manaus was probably a not very popular flight to get. As always, his prediction was correct. With tickets retrieved, he journeyed back to Chuuya before braving the queues leading to security. To Dazai, the metal detectors were a novelty he had never had the pleasure of experiencing before. Whenever he traveled with the Port Mafia, carrying a gun was practically a requirement. The metal detectors had a certain way of making him feel paranoid of being caught smuggling a knife, even though he was doing nothing wrong at the moment. He had undeniably committed crimes, but they would need more than a metal detector to convict him of those. At long last, they made it through all the security and passport checks, despite their passports being fake. The metal detector was somehow the thing that made him feel like he was doing something wrong. The announcer's voice blared overhead, only adding to the cacophony of the airport. Hey Dazai, Chuuya said. Did they just say our flight was boarding? The bottom dropped out of Dazai's stomach. He whipped around to look at the departures board, helpfully installed at every corner of the airport. Manaus, Gate G, 1950. Boarding. Oh fuck, he muttered. Where even is Gate G? He frantically looked around for anything that might hint at where they were supposed to be. He had to hold in a gasp when he felt Chuuya's warm fingers brush his, then intertwine in his own. His brain blanked. Chuuya's hands were soft against his own, the warmth heating up his hands in all the right ways. Something in his chest did a flip, which he found a little concerning. And then he was being tugged along behind Chuuya, ducking around people, their connected hands the only thing stopping them from being parted. Dazai really hoped Chuuya knew where he was leading him. He had no idea where they were going. Chuuya didn't let go even as the crowd thinned out. Dazai was grateful. First of all, Chuuya was a lot faster than Dazai could ever hope to keep up with otherwise. But also, he didn't quite want to let go. He didn't know why. It just felt nice. It felt right. Dazai frowned. How could holding Chuuya's hands feel right? That didn't make any sense. Dazai had read in sloppy romance books how people's hands would fit together. He had never quite understood that. He supposed the sizes of their hands just went together nicely, which was an odd feat for something as irregular as a hand. He didn't quite understand how all the protagonists found themselves with someone with a genetically identical hand, but he didn't read sloppy romance novels to judge hand sizes. However, with Chuuya's small hand laced with his own, he finally understood. He and Chuuya did not have genetically correct hand sizes. It just felt correct. Chuuya's hand in his silenced some monster stirring in his chest, helped tamper down some of the emptiness. His hand didn't fit in Chuuya's literally, but he finally knew that it wasn't literally that people always talked about. He just knew, somewhere deep inside him, that this was how it was supposed to be. They reached the gate just in the nick of time, and Chuuya dropped Dazai's hand. Looking down at his hand, he felt suddenly like there was something missing. He clenched his fingers into a fist, but found nothing that his brain said should be there. They climbed aboard the plane, Dazai panting and Chuuya not even breaking a sweat. Dazai hadn't run in a very long time and vowed to never do it again. That was awful. How people did this for fun was beyond him. If Chuuya's hand had not distracted him from this unfortunate situation, he didn't doubt that he would have collapsed on the way to the plane. The pilot spoke over the speakers in 3 different languages, none of which Dazai understood, and they were off. Thailand shrunk into many little lights, like fireflies, then one big light, and then it was gone, replaced by a pitch-black sea. Finally having caught his breath, he looked over at Chuuya, who was squinting at the TV display showing the plane's journey. Hey Mackerel, Chuuya started. Where is Manaus? Where is Manaus? Was Dazai hearing that right? He stared at Chuuya, shocked. You mean to tell me, he said slowly, disbelieving, That you got on a plane to Manaus without even knowing where Manaus is? Chuuya scowled. I thought it was in India, but now we've set off and we're going in the complete opposite direction to India. Well, yes, because we'll be going over the Pacific. Chuuya looked at him, eyes wide. The Pacific? Manaus is in Brazil, after all. Brazil? Yes, that's what I just said. Are you going to repeat everything I say? Chuuya stared at the seat in front of him, shocked. Dazai held in a laugh. Chuuya looked kind of cute like this. You would never guess he used to be an executive in the Mafia. He could be any other 18-year-old, although a particularly short 18-year-old. We're going to South America? Chuuya asked, disbelieving. Congratulations! You know what continent Brazil is in. I never thought you had it in you, hat rack. Chuuya swatted at Dazai's arm. Shut the fuck up before I throw you off this plane myself. Tell me more about Manaus. I've never done a geography lesson in my life. What a truly blessed life you've lived, Chibi. Dazai smiled, teasing. I don't know much, but I certainly know more than you. I know it's in Brazil, for one. Chuuya gave him a warning glare. Okay. It's in the middle of the Amazon, you know, in the big rainforest. I know what the fucking Amazon is, dipshit. Ah, good. Dazai smiled. I suppose we'll have to find the rest out when we get there. Chuuya rolled his eyes, turning back to the screen in front of the seat and selecting a movie. They were going to be in for a long flight, 22 hours to be exact. Chuuya laid his arm on the armrest. Dazai looked at Chuuya's hand and felt the overwhelming urge to take it in his again. It'd been so nice before. Maybe he wouldn't feel quite as empty again. It wouldn't take much. He'd just have to lean over. No, Chuuya wouldn't want that. He had only taken Dazai's hand before to keep them together. Dazai knew that. Before, Dazai would not have thought twice about just taking, even if Chuuya didn't want it. But he was not the Dazai from before anymore. Chuuya was the only person in his life at the moment, and Dazai was pretty sure things humans were supposed to do was to give other humans a choice, so he held off. However, that didn't stop the longing to feel Chuuya's hand in his again. Tearing his eyes away, he forced himself to look at the screen in front of him. Despite the many options for movies and TV shows, nothing caught his attention. Sighing, he rested his head back, pulling his headphones on just to block out the roar of the plane, and tried to get some sleep. After 5 minutes of blankly staring at the back of his eyelids, the sounds around him not miraculously fading away or his mind being filled with nonsensical pictures, Dazai opened his eyes again. All there was outside the window was pitch-black darkness. He was in for a very long flight. He looked towards Chuuya, nearly jumping out of his skin when he saw Chuuya staring at him. The plane was dark, and he could only see the faint outline of Chuuya, but his eyes seemed unnaturally reflective. He hadn't expected Chuuya to be watching him like he was some interesting specimen. Chuuya's ugliness gave me a fright, Dazai exclaimed, trying to keep his voice down. Chuuya rolled his eyes. Did you ever think you'd be here? Dazai frowned. What? Did you ever think you'd be here? I heard you the first time, Chuuya. It's what you meant that I didn't quite understand. Chuuya rolled his eyes again, like it was Dazai's fault for not being able to gaze directly into that thing he called a brain and understand instantly. Do you ever think you'd get to do something like this? Leave the Mafia, go traveling, all that? Dazai cast his mind back to the Mafia. Mafia Dazai had never even paused to think about something like traveling. Going traveling was a thing normal people did, and Dazai had alienated himself from that world a long time ago. He had places he might like to see, sure, but nothing more than a passing thought. He went where the Mafia sent him, and that was enough for him. He never thought about where he might like to go. What was the point? He thought he would never get the chance anyway. No, he admitted, as if one word could sum up all the thoughts he was feeling. Chuuya stared at him, imploring him to say more. I mean, I'd never thought I'd have the opportunity, so I never thought about it. Chuuya hummed, thoughtful. Once you're in the Mafia life, it feels like you could never leave. Dazai shrugged. He wasn't sure where all this introspective stuff was suddenly coming from. Sure, I suppose. There was a stilted silence that wasn't really silent at all, but it sure felt it. Dazai could tell Chuuya wanted to ask something, in the way his mouth was stuck half open and his eyes were cast off, staring intently at the seat in front of him. Chuuya just didn't know how to ask. Dazai would wait. They had a very long flight to fill up, after all. "If you don't mind me asking," started Chuuya, uncharacteristically polite, "why did you want to leave the Mafia?" "Not like why. I know your friend died, but you've had friends die before. Why this friend?" A sudden rush of dread ran through Dazai's mind. He had tried to keep his mind off Otosaku. He'd tried so hard. He had been trying to remember only the good bits, the parts Otosaku would have wanted him to remember. He tried not to remember the way Oda's blood covered his hands, and the light leaving his eyes, and... He took a deep breath, shutting his eyes. Otosaku would stay dead, no matter what he did. Panicking like this was useless and illogical. He should stop. But he looked at Chuuya, his blue eyes softer than Dazai had ever seen, and Dazai felt suddenly still. His mind stopped going at its painfully fast pace, and it just stilled. Something about Chuuya's watchful gaze enveloped Dazai completely, not quite ridding him of the longing and the missing, but making the longing and the missing feel like they had a place within him, because everything was right. Dazai took a breath. "Oda never killed, you know." He didn't know why he was spilling all this to Chuuya. Chuuya probably deserved the truth, but the details? Dazai hardly even knew how he felt. How could he put it into words? But something about the situation, something about Chuuya, made everything that Dazai didn't know he kept inside come pouring out. Something about wanting to be an author, and that he couldn't write if he took a life. I never understood it, but it was interesting, you know? Dazai smiled fondly at the memory. All the nights spent drinking, talking endlessly because Otosaku was interesting enough to Dazai that he never got bored. Nights that would never happen again. He frowned. Looking back on it, he must have known that day was his last, and he would never have been able to become an author anyway. He took down all of Mimic by himself. He fought back images of Otosaku lying there on the floor. If only he had called for backup. If only Dazai had realized what was going on quicker. If only... Dazai shook his head, trying to rid the thoughts from his head. "I was there when he died," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "He told me to live on the side that saves people, because at least that is a little more beautiful. I don't know why his death affected me so much. It just did. I miss him, Chuuya. All the time." He had to take a deep breath. He felt the familiar pain in the back of his throat, but crying was useless. Crying would get him nowhere. He forced that feeling down. "I know you're looking for some big reason for why him, but truthfully, I haven't gotten one." "Did you love him?" Chuuya asked. Realizing what he'd said, he went scarlet. "Not like romance, just like, I don't know, friends, you know?" Love. Dazai thought about it, and found he couldn't quite understand it all. If he tried to imagine it, there was no feeling that he could hang on to. Nothing like he had heard people call love. He had never deserved anything that nice. That was just how it was. He wasn't human in so many ways. He had long ago accepted that he would never be loved in any way that mattered. There was no one out there who would gaze into his mess of being and decide he was worth it. He didn't even know if he could love or not. He had never allowed himself to love. What was the point? He'd seen love destroy too many people. Love had no place in a world like his. He smiled sadly. "People like me don't get things like love." Chuuya frowned. "Well, that's bullshit." Dazai laughed, the laugh sounding fake even to his own ears. "I'm gonna need to see some evidence for that one, Chibi." "I'm gathering it," Chuuya insisted. "Sure you are." Dazai turned away, trying to gather his thoughts. There was a minute of silence. Chuuya didn't seem to have any more questions, but something felt unfinished. Dazai took a deep breath. "You know, that's not the only reason I ever thought I would get to do this." Chuuya looked over, attentive. Dazai didn't know why he was saying this. These were things he was supposed to keep inside. He shouldn't be burdening Chuuya with his absolute mess of a being. Despite that, he didn't want to stop. I actually never thought I'd live this long. There was no point to planning travel when I thought I'd be dead in a ditch by 16. Chuuya looked unsurprised. What about now? Do you still want to be dead in a ditch? Did he? He hadn't thought about it in quite a while, actually, but it's not like he particularly didn't want to die either. It was odd, like he was in the void between wanting to live and wanting to die, wandering alone with neither feeling guaranteed to last. He gestured, trying to find the right words. It was completely indefinable, and that by itself made it difficult. Not completely, sometimes, I suppose. Don't get me wrong, if I was to die right this instant, I wouldn't be disappointed in the slightest. But I don't know. He shrugged. I don't actively wish to throw myself off the nearest building. Good. There was a small smile on Chuuya's lips. Just the sight of that alone sent shivers down Dazai's spine. He had seen Chuuya smile countless times before. Why now? Why did Dazai want to see Chuuya smile, that specific smile, over and over? Chuuya had turned back to his movie. Dazai shuffled over, stealing one of Chuuya's headphones and closing the distance between them by leaning his head on Chuuya's shoulder. Dazai neither watched nor listened to the movie, too preoccupied with how he never wanted to move from the comfort of Chuuya's shoulder. There were tingles on his skin where he and Chuuya touched, and he wanted to curl up right there and never leave. He let himself be lulled to sleep with the white noise of the movie and the gentle rise and fall of Chuuya's chest. Well, we're over halfway done. That's cool. Also, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Is it Manaus? I don't know. I looked it up and Google said it was that, so Google is always right, actually.